Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at immigration, a topic that's, well, incredibly complex and multifaceted. And to guide us through this, we'll be using the ever-reliable Wikipedia article on immigration as our roadmap.
Always a good place to start.
Now, we could spend hours, days even, talking about all the different aspects of immigration, but we're going to focus on what we think is most interesting and relevant for you guys.
Exactly. And to get us started, it's important to remember that immigration as a phenomenon has been around forever, literally since the dawn of humankind.
Right. Like, think about how humans populated the entire planet. It was all about migration, moving from one place to another.
Right. Although in the past, it was often a bit less, well, let's say organized than it is today, more about conquering new lands and all that.
Yeah, not exactly filling out visa applications and waiting in line for customs.
Exactly. Those were the days of mass movements, often driven by conflict and, let's be honest, a bit of a free-for-all. But these days, it's a whole different ballgame.
So less about conquering hordes and more about, like, regulated borders and immigration policies.
Exactly. So before we get lost in the complexities of modern immigration, let's take a step back and define what we actually mean by immigration in today's world.
Good point. Because everyone travels these days, but not everyone who travels is an immigrant. So what's the key difference?
The intention. Immigration is about people moving to a country that's not their native land, with the aim of settling there permanently. It's about putting down roots, not just passing through.
So it's that intention to create a new life in a new country that really distinguishes an immigrant from, say, a tourist or someone on a short-term work visa.
Exactly. And this might also be a good time to clear up a common confusion, the difference between immigrants and immigrants.
Oh, yeah, I've always wondered about that. It sounds like the same thing, just with a different prefix.
Well, it is the same person, just viewed from different perspectives. An immigrant is someone coming into a country, whereas an immigrant is someone exiting their country of origin.
Ah, okay, got it. So now that we have the definition sorted out, let's dive into some numbers because, well, numbers don't lie, do they?
Numbers can be pretty revealing.
For instance, did you know that about 3% of the global population are immigrants? That's mind-boggling. 3% of everyone on this planet living outside the country where they were born.
And here's another kicker, that percentage has remained remarkably stable since 1990. So it's not a new phenomenon. It's been a consistent part of our global landscape for decades.
And those percentages translate into millions of people making life-altering decisions to move to new countries.
You got it. In 2015 alone, the number of international migrants hit a staggering 244 million.
244 million. Whoa. That's like more than the entire population of many countries combined.
And that's a whopping 41% increase from the year 2000. So global migration is clearly on the rise.
Okay, so we're talking massive numbers of people here. And I'm guessing the U.S. is at the top of the list when it comes to hosting immigrants, right?
You guessed right. The U.S. is home to a jaw-dropping 19% of the world's immigrants. Think about that. Almost 1 in 5 immigrants globally ends up in the United States.
Like a global magnet for people seeking new opportunities and, I guess, the American dream.
Exactly. The U.S. has always been seen as a land of opportunity, a place where people can come to build a better life for themselves and their families.
It's interesting to see how certain countries become these global hubs for migration.
Right. But the U.S. isn't the only hotspot. The article highlights Asia as another region experiencing a significant surge in immigration.
Oh yeah, Asia's been booming economically, so it makes sense that more people would be drawn to its shores.
Absolutely. Between 2000 and 2015, Asia added a whopping 26 million new immigrants. That's the most of any region globally during that time.
So the world is definitely in motion, with people moving across borders in unprecedented numbers. But what's the driving force behind all this movement? Why are so many people choosing to pack up their lives and start over in a new country?
It's rarely a simple answer. You see, there's a theory, the push-pull theory, that attempts to explain this complex phenomenon. Imagine it like two opposing forces acting on an individual.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these push and pull factors.
The push factors are the things that, well, make staying in one's home country difficult, maybe even impossible. It could be a lack of economic opportunity, political instability, or even outright persecution.
So it's like the situation at home becomes so unbearable that people feel they have no choice but to leave.
Exactly. Sometimes it's about survival, about finding a place where you and your family can be safe and secure.
And what about the pull factors? Are those the things that make a particular country attractive to immigrants?
Precisely. Think of things like Better job prospects, higher wages, a more stable political environment, or even something as simple as the desire to reunite with family members who have already migrated. These are all powerful incentives.
So it's like a combination of being pushed away from a difficult situation at home and pulled towards a more promising future in a new country.
You've got it. It's a complex interplay of factors that ultimately drives people to make the difficult decision to migrate.
And of course, all this movement of people has a ripple effect on economies around the world.
Right. One of the most hotly debated aspects of immigration is its impact on the economy, both for the receiving country and for the sending country.
Right, because there are arguments on both sides. Some say immigration is a boon for the economy, while others warn about the potential negative consequences.
It's definitely a nuanced issue, and it's important to avoid oversimplifications. There's a general consensus among economists that overall, immigration has net positive effects, both for receiving and sending countries.
Really? That's interesting. It seems counterintuitive to what many people might assume. How does that work?
Well, for starters, immigrants bring new skills and fresh perspectives. They often fill labor gaps, boost economic activity, and even help offset the challenges of aging populations in developed countries.
Right, so in countries where the birth rate is declining, immigrants can help to keep the workforce young and vibrant. It's like injecting fresh energy into a system that's starting to slow down.
Precisely. And immigrants are often highly entrepreneurial, starting new businesses and creating new jobs, not just for themselves, but for others as well.
So it's not just about filling existing jobs, it's also about creating new opportunities and expanding the economic pie for everyone. But I mean, there must be some potential downsides too, right? The article mentioned some concerns about the impact on wages and employment, particularly for native workers in certain sectors.
You're absolutely right. While the overall impact might be positive, there can be localized challenges, especially for native workers in low-skilled jobs who may experience increased competition.
So while the overall economy might benefit, certain groups of workers might actually see their wages go down or even lose their jobs.
Yeah, that's a real concern, and it's important to acknowledge those potential downsides. But it's not as simple as saying immigration always leads to wage suppression.
So what are the factors that determine whether the impact of immigration on jobs and wages is positive or negative?
Well, it depends on a lot of things. For example, the skills and education levels of the immigrants themselves play a big role.
Right, so highly skilled immigrants, like doctors, engineers, or scientists, are more likely to complement the existing workforce and bring in new expertise.
Exactly. They're often filling gaps in the labor market and driving innovation, whereas low-skilled immigrants might compete more directly for certain jobs, potentially leading to downward pressure on wages in those sectors.
That makes sense. And I imagine the overall health of the host country's economy also matters, right?
Definitely. A booming economy is likely to absorb more immigrants without significant disruption, while a struggling economy might feel the strain more acutely.
So it's all about context. The same influx of immigrants could have very different impacts depending on the economic climate.
Exactly. And here's another layer of complexity. The reasons why people are migrating also factor into the equation.
Really? I wouldn't have thought that someone's reasons for migrating would have a significant impact on the economy. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. Take refugees, for example. They're often fleeing conflict or persecution, so their integration into the workforce might take longer and require more resources.
Right, because they might have experienced trauma, or they might not have had the opportunity to develop the same skills as those who migrated for economic reasons.
Exactly. So their impact on the economy might be different from those who come specifically for job opportunities.
So we can't just lump all immigrants together when we're analyzing their economic impact. Their circumstances, their skills, their reasons for migrating, they all play a role in how they integrate into the labor market.
Exactly. It's much more nuanced than a simple immigration is good or immigration is bad argument. The reality is far more complex and context dependent.
Speaking of nuance, weren't there some interesting case studies that highlight the complexity of immigration's economic impacts?
You're thinking of the Mariel boat lift, right?
Yeah, that's the one. I vaguely remember learning about it in history class. Something about a massive influx of Cuban refugees arriving in Miami in the 1980s.
That's right. In 1980, over 125,000 Cubans arrived in Miami, basically overnight, because of the Mariel boat lift.
Wow, 125,000 people. That must have put a huge strain on Miami's resources and infrastructure.
It definitely did. And economists actually saw this as a sort of natural experiment.
A natural experiment. How so?
Well, it provided a unique opportunity to study the impact of a sudden and large-scale influx of immigrants on a local economy. It was like a real-world test case.
So what did they find? Did Miami's economy collapse under the weight of all those new arrivals?
Surprisingly, no. Research on the Mariel boat lift actually suggests that it had a minimal impact on the wages of native Miami residents.
Really? That's counterintuitive. You'd think that such a huge influx of people would drive down wages, especially for low-skilled workers.
You would, but the evidence suggests otherwise. It seems the Cuban immigrants were generally entrepreneurial and integrated into the local economy pretty quickly, creating new businesses and opportunities rather than just competing for existing jobs.
So they brought with them a spirit of innovation and a willingness to create their own path. That's fascinating.
It challenges the common assumption that a surge in immigration automatically leads to economic hardship for native workers. But of course, it's just one case study, and we can't draw sweeping conclusions from it.
Right. Context is everything. And I think we also talked about a contrasting example where immigration did seem to have a negative impact on wages. Wasn't there something about Czech workers in Germany?
You have a sharp memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this sudden influx of Czech workers into Germany.
It must have felt like a seismic shift for people who had been separated for decades. Suddenly, they had the freedom to move and work across the border.
It was a historic moment. And in this case, studies did find some evidence of negative impacts on the wages of some native German workers, particularly those in low-skilled jobs.
So we have two seemingly contradictory examples. One shows minimal economic impact, the other shows some negative impact. How do we reconcile these seemingly different outcomes?
It all comes down to the specifics of each situation. The Mariel boat lift and the Czech worker influx were very different events occurring in different contexts, different skill sets, different economic conditions, different integration patterns. All of these factors contributed to the different outcomes.
So it's not as simple as saying immigration is inherently good or bad for the economy. It really depends on a whole range of factors that need to be considered carefully.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that the impact of immigration extends far beyond just jobs and wages. There's also its influence on innovation and entrepreneurship.
Now, that's an area I'm really curious about. I've always thought that immigrants, by virtue of their experiences and perspectives, can bring a lot of creativity and fresh thinking to the table. Is there any evidence to support that intuition?
Quite a bit, actually. The article highlights some pretty impressive stats about immigrant-founded businesses. Did you know that over half of the unicorn startups in the U.S., those valued at $1 billion or more, were founded by immigrants?
Seriously? Half? That's incredible.
It's a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit that often drives people to immigrate in the first place. They come to a new country with a desire to build a new life, and that often translates into a willingness to take risks and pursue unconventional ideas.
Right. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo and shake things up. And that kind of thinking is often the key to innovation.
Exactly. And it's not just anecdotal evidence. Research also suggests a strong correlation between immigration and higher rates of invention and patent filings.
So immigrants aren't just filling jobs. They're also bringing in new ideas, creating new products, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Precisely. They're injecting dynamism and fresh thinking into the economy. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Immigrants often have to be highly adaptable, resourceful, and willing to think outside the box just to survive and thrive in a new environment.
Right. They've already taken a huge leap of faith by leaving their home country and starting over in a new place. So maybe that willingness to embrace risk and uncertainty translates into a greater capacity for innovation.
It's a compelling argument. But hold on a second. If all these talented and entrepreneurial people are leaving their home countries, doesn't that create problems for those countries? What about the brain drain effect we talked about earlier?
Yeah, that was a concern we touched on. If a country loses its brightest minds to emigration, it could stifle its own growth and development.
That's a valid concern, especially for developing countries that are already facing significant economic and social challenges. The loss of skilled professionals can have a real impact on their ability to progress.
It's like a vicious cycle. The lack of opportunities at home pushes talented individuals to seek those opportunities elsewhere, but their departure further weakens the country's capacity for growth.
It's a difficult dilemma. On one hand, individuals have the right to pursue a better life and maximize their potential, but on the other hand, their departure can have negative consequences for their home country.
So how do we navigate this tension between individual aspirations and collective responsibilities. Is there a way to mitigate the negative impacts of brain drain while still allowing individuals the freedom to choose where they want to live and work?
It's a complex question with no easy answers. But there are some potential solutions. For example, some countries try to incentivize their skilled immigrants to return by offering them tax breaks or other benefits.
So it's about creating a more attractive environment for those who have left to come back and contribute their skills and knowledge to their home countries.
Exactly. And there's also the concept of brain circulation, which emphasizes the positive aspects of skilled migration. Even if someone leaves their home country, they can still maintain ties and contribute remotely through investments, collaborations, or mentorship.
So it's not always a one-way street. Even if someone physically migrates to a new country, they can still maintain connections and contribute to their country of origin.
Exactly. And sometimes those who emigrate eventually return to their home countries with new skills, new ideas, and valuable international experience. This can lead to a brain gain effect, where the country actually benefits from the temporary emigration of its skilled workforce.
It's like a boomerang effect. They leave to expand their horizons, and then they come back with a wealth of knowledge and expertise to share.
It's a reminder that migration isn't always a zero-sum game. Both the sending and receiving countries can potentially benefit from the flow of skilled workers.
It's a complex and nuanced issue, but it's clear that the movement of people across borders has a profound impact on economies around the world.
Absolutely, and that impact extends far beyond just the economic sphere. Immigration also has significant social, cultural, and ethical dimensions that we need to explore.
Right. It's not just about numbers and statistics. It's about people, their lives, their identities, and their interactions within a complex global society.
And that's a conversation for our next deep dive session.
I'm already intrigued. But for now, let's take a break and give our listeners a chance to process all this information. We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of the fascinating world of immigration.
As we dig deeper into this, it's important to remember that immigration is more than just abstract concepts and statistics. It's about real people making life-altering decisions to leave their homes and build new lives in unfamiliar places.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff. But ultimately, immigration is about individual journeys filled with challenges, hopes, and dreams.
Precisely. And sometimes exploring specific examples can help us grasp those individual journeys a little better.
Yeah, like those contrasting case studies we talked about earlier, the Mariel boat lift in Miami and the influx of Czech workers into Germany after the Berlin Wall fell.
Exactly. They really highlighted how the economic impact of immigration isn't always predictable or uniform. It's highly context dependent.
Right. The same event can have very different outcomes depending on the circumstances.
Let's revisit that Czech worker example for a moment. Remember, this was after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when the border between what was then Czechoslovakia and Germany suddenly became much more open.
Yeah, it was a historic moment. Suddenly, people had the freedom to move between those countries after decades of separation. So what happened when those Czech workers entered the German labor market?
Well, as we discussed, the studies on this case did find a measurable impact on the wages of some native German workers, especially those in low-skill jobs.
So in that particular case, the concern that immigrants might drive down wages, well, it wasn't just a hypothetical worry, it actually played out in reality.
It did. But it's crucial to remember that this was a unique situation. The influx of Czech workers was sudden and on a massive scale, and the German economy at that time wasn't necessarily ready to absorb such a rapid increase in the labor supply.
Right, the timing and the sheer volume of the influx probably played a big role in the impact on wages.
Absolutely. Context is key. The same event could have very different consequences under different circumstances.
That makes a lot of sense. And it reminds me of another concern we touched upon earlier, the brain drain issue. Are there any real-world examples of countries that have really struggled with the immigration of their skilled workers?
Oh, definitely. Think about countries grappling with poverty or political instability. Their most talented and educated citizens often seek better opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, if your home country can't offer you a stable future or a chance to thrive, it's understandable why you'd look for those things in other places, even if it means leaving behind everything you know.
It's a difficult choice, but for many, it's about survival, about creating a better future for themselves and their families.
Right. It highlights how global issues are interconnected. Problems in one part of the world can drive migration patterns in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. But let's flip the script for a moment. What about the potential benefits of skilled migration? We briefly talked about brain gain before.
Yeah, the idea that even if some skilled people leave,
Hmm.
it can actually incentivize others to get better educated, hoping to emigrate themselves.
Exactly. And sometimes those who emigrate return to their home countries with new skills and experience, leading to what we call a brain gain effect.
So it's like they go out into the world, learn new things, and then bring that knowledge back home to share. It's a win-win situation.
Precisely. Think about the recent economic growth in countries like India and China. Part of their success can be attributed to the return of highly skilled professionals who had previously emigrated to developed countries.
So they leave, gain experience, and then return with valuable skills and knowledge that can help their home countries develop.
Exactly. It's a testament to the power of human capital and how it can circulate globally. It's not always a one-way street.
Fascinating. It challenges the notion that emigration is always a loss for the sending country. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the social and cultural impacts of immigration, which are often hotly debated.
Right, it can be a very emotionally charged issue. And one of the central themes in this debate is assimilation, the process by which immigrants adapt to the culture and norms of their new country.
Right. The idea that they should learn the language, adopt the customs, and, well, essentially become part of the fabric of their new society.
But there's no single definition of what assimilation should look like or how it should be achieved.
Right, like, should immigrants be expected to completely abandon their own cultures and fully embrace the dominant culture of their new home?
Some people argue for that melting pot approach, where everyone blends together into a homogeneous society.
But doesn't that risk losing the richness and diversity that different cultures bring to a society?
That's a valid point, and it's why others advocate for a more multicultural approach, where immigrants are encouraged to maintain their cultural identities while also participating in the broader society.
So more like a salad bowl, where different ingredients retain their unique flavors while contributing to a more complex and interesting whole.
Exactly. And within this debate, there's also the question of language. Should fluency in the dominant language be a requirement for citizenship or permanent residency?
It's a tough question. On the one hand, it seems like being able to communicate effectively is essential for integration and participation in society. But on the other hand, is it fair to ask people to abandon their native languages, which are so deeply tied to their identities and cultures?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and it highlights the need for a nuanced and sensitive approach to integration.
Right. It's about finding a balance between encouraging integration and respecting cultural diversity. But unfortunately, regardless of how well immigrants integrate, they often face discrimination and prejudice.
You're right. Discrimination is, sadly, a reality for many immigrants around the world. They often face suspicion, hostility, and even violence simply because they're perceived as different.
It's a dark side of human nature that we need to confront and challenge.
Absolutely. Discrimination can take many forms, from subtle biases to overt acts of racism and xenophobia, and it can have a devastating impact on individuals, families, and entire communities.
It can limit opportunities, create barriers to success, erode trust, and foster a climate of fear and insecurity.
Exactly. And it goes against the fundamental principles of fairness and equality that should underpin any just society.
So how do we address this problem? How do we create a more welcoming and inclusive society for immigrants?
It's a multifaceted challenge that requires a multi-pronged approach. Education is crucial. We need to challenge stereotypes, promote intercultural understanding, and celebrate the contributions of immigrants.
Right, it's about shifting mindsets and fostering a culture of empathy and respect.
Absolutely. And it also requires strong legal frameworks that protect the rights of immigrants and ensure that they have equal access to opportunities.
Which brings us back to that UN Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers that we mentioned earlier. Didn't we say that many major receiving countries haven't ratified this convention?
That's right. And this reluctance to ratify highlights the tension between the ideals of international law and the realities of national sovereignty.
Right, because even though there are international agreements aimed at protecting the rights of migrants, each country ultimately gets to decide how it will treat those individuals within its own borders.
Exactly. There's a lot of variation in how different countries approach immigration, both legally and ethically.
So the experience of being an immigrant can vary drastically depending on where you land. Some countries are more welcoming and inclusive, while others are more restrictive, even hostile.
It's true. And it highlights the importance of understanding the specific legal and social context of different countries when discussing immigration.
Right, because a policy that might seem reasonable in one context could be deeply problematic in another. And beyond the legal frameworks, there are also those deeper ethical dilemmas to consider.
Absolutely. And one of the most fundamental ethical debates revolves around the idea of freedom of movement.
Right, that idea that people should have the right to live and work wherever they choose, regardless of where they were born. But that often clashes with the idea of national sovereignty, the right of a country to control its own borders.
Exactly. It's a classic conflict of values. On the one hand, you have the individual's right to seek a better life and pursue opportunities. On the other hand, you have the state's responsibility to protect its own interests, including its borders.
So how do we reconcile these competing values? It's a tough balancing act.
There are no easy answers. It's a debate that has been going on for centuries, and it's likely to continue for centuries more.
Right. And it reminds us that immigration isn't just a political or economic issue. It's also a deeply human issue that raises fundamental questions about fairness, justice, and our responsibilities to each other as global citizens.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about how we treat each other, how we share resources, and how we create a world that is just and equitable for everyone, regardless of where they were born.
It's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth grappling with. And I think the key to finding solutions lies in education, understanding, and empathy.
Couldn't agree more. The more we learn about immigration, the better equipped we are to engage in these conversations constructively and find solutions that benefit everyone.
So as we move towards wrapping up this deep dive, is there anything that has particularly resonated with you from our discussion so far?
You know, what's really sticking with me is the realization that there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to immigration. It's a multifaceted issue with economic, social, cultural, and ethical dimensions that are all intertwined.
Absolutely. And trying to simplify it or reduce it to a single narrative just doesn't do it justice.
Exactly. It's about embracing the complexity and understanding the nuances of each specific situation.
And it's about recognizing that immigration, despite the challenges it presents, also offers incredible opportunities for growth, innovation, and cultural enrichment.
Well said. It's a reminder that immigration is not just a problem to be solved, but also a potential source of strength and vitality for societies around the world.
Well, here we are at the end of our deep dive into immigration.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the historical context to the economic impacts, the social and cultural dimensions, and even the ethical considerations.
Yeah, it's been a pretty intense but incredibly insightful journey, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this vast and complex topic.
You're absolutely right. There's always more to learn and explore when it comes to immigration. But as we wrap up this episode, I'd love to hear your final thoughts. What are the key takeaways you're leaving with?
You know, for me, one of the most powerful realizations has been the reminder that immigration, at its core, is about people. It's about individual human beings making incredibly difficult choices, often driven by forces beyond their control.
It's so easy to get lost in the abstract debates and the statistics, but at the end of the day, it's about real people's lives, their aspirations, their struggles, their hopes for a better future.
Exactly. Behind every data point, every headline, every policy debate, there's a human story waiting to be told.
It's a call for empathy, to see the world through the eyes of those who have made the difficult decision to leave their homes and start over in a new place. So, as we reflect on everything we've discussed, what are some of the most important insights we should carry with us?
Well, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of nuance. Immigration is not a simple issue with easy answers. It's incredibly multifaceted and layered.
Right. It's about recognizing that there are legitimate concerns and perspectives on all sides of the debate.
Exactly. And it's about moving beyond simplistic narratives and engaging with the full complexity of the issue.
Because there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works in one context might not work in another.
Precisely. And I think the key to finding effective solutions is to approach the issue with a deep understanding of those complexities.
Which is why education is so important. The more we learn about immigration, the better equipped we are to have those nuanced conversations and to advocate for policies that are both just and effective.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And in the context of immigration, knowledge can be a powerful tool for challenging prejudice, promoting understanding, and building a more inclusive world.
So as we conclude this deep dive, what's the most enduring insight you're taking away from our exploration of immigration?
Well, I think it comes back to that idea of nuance, but also the recognition that immigration is not just a challenge, but also a tremendous opportunity.
Ah, yes. Immigrants bring with them so much diverse talents, fresh perspectives, and a wealth of experiences that can truly enrich our societies.
It's about seeing immigration not as a problem to be solved, but as a potential source of strength and dynamism.
Right, it's about creating a world where people can move freely and safely, pursuing their dreams, and contributing their unique gifts to the global community.
Absolutely. And it's about embracing diversity, not as a threat, but as a source of creativity, innovation, and progress.
Well said. It's been an incredible journey exploring this complex and fascinating topic with you.
Likewise, I've learned so much from our conversation.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
We encourage you to continue exploring this important and ever-evolving topic. There's always more to learn and discover.
And remember, stay curious, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. All right, let's dive into this butterfly effect thing. It's that idea that even the tiniest actions can have these massive consequences. You know, that whole butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and then boom, a tornado in Texas. But is there any truth to that? Well, today we're going to try to unpack this whole mind-bending concept. We're using excerpts from, you guessed it, the Wikipedia article on the butterfly effect.
That saying definitely grabs your attention, doesn't it? What's interesting is this butterfly effect comes from chaos theory. It's all about this sensitive dependence on initial conditions. So basically, the tiniest change at the start of something can totally change the outcome.
So kind of like how one tiny wrong turn on a road trip, it can throw you off by miles.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a system where even a little nudge can snowball into something huge.
Okay, and so that's where this butterfly effect Wikipedia article comes in.
Right, it gets into all the details, even the technical stuff. It explains how even if 2 points in a system start super close together, they can end up worlds apart over time, all because of that tiny initial difference.
Okay, I can sort of see how this could be like in real life. But can you give me an example? I always hear this idea connected to the weather. But how does that work, really?
Well, think about those weather apps, the ones we use all the time. Have you ever noticed how a 5-day forecast is so much less accurate than a 2-day forecast?
Oh, yeah, totally. Trying to predict the weather weeks ahead is like just guessing?
Exactly, because the atmosphere is just unbelievably complex. Even a tiny change in air currents, like what a butterfly's wings would make, that can set off a chain reaction. And those little changes, they can affect larger weather patterns.
Wait, so are you saying one butterfly could actually cause a tornado weeks later? That's crazy.
Not exactly. The butterfly isn't creating the tornado by itself. It's more like it's part of this web of starting conditions. Imagine one set of conditions with the butterfly flap leads to a tornado, but another set, maybe the butterfly's chilling out and there's no tornado.
So it's more about how unpredictable these systems are, even with our computers and everything.
You got it. This whole sensitive dependence on initial conditions makes predicting things a real challenge. Edward Lorenz, the meteorologist, the guy who made the butterfly effect famous, he came across this back in the 1960s. He was doing weather simulations on his computer, and he found that just rounding off his data a tiny bit totally changed the whole outcome.
Seriously, he's just trying to make the numbers simpler. And suddenly the weather's completely different. That's a wild discovery.
Yeah. And when he presented his findings, he even used the image of a butterfly. It perfectly shows, the delicate balance and how unpredictable these systems are.
It's crazy how one simple image can become so powerful. But, the Wikipedia article mentions that Lorenz wasn't the first one with these ideas. Seems like other people had kind of hinted at it before.
That's true. Way before Lorenz, even before he came up with the term butterfly effect, there were hints of it in other people's work. Take the children's book, The Phantom Toll Booth. It was published in 1962. And it talks about how a tiny housefly, flapping its wings, creates a breeze that goes around the whole world.
No way. A children's book hinting at chaos theory. That's awesome. It sounds like this idea was just waiting for someone to explore it fully.
Exactly. And then Lorenz came along, did the science, and brought it to the forefront.
So small changes, big effects. Got it. But the Wikipedia article goes even deeper. It talks about different types of butterfly effects.
It does. Scientists have identified a few types, each with its own quirks. For example, one type focuses on that sensitivity to starting conditions we talked about. Another one explores how tiny changes can create these huge circulations over long distances, like that butterfly and tornado thing.
Mhm.
And then there's even one that focuses on the limits of what we can predict in these chaotic systems.
Thinking about all those types, it makes me wonder about that butterfly and tornado example. It sounds catchy and all, but is it really that simple in real life?
That's a great question. The idea of a butterfly causing a tornado, it might be a bit too simplified. Some scientists think that weather systems aren't always as sensitive to initial conditions as we thought.
So are you saying the butterfly effect isn't real when it comes to weather?
Not necessarily. Even if we haven't found an actual butterfly causing a tornado, the bigger idea still holds up. There's a limit to how far ahead we can accurately predict things, especially when dealing with complex systems like weather.
Yeah, it makes sense. There are probably tons of other things affecting the weather, things our models haven't even begun to account for.
Exactly. And those missing pieces of the puzzle could be way more important than we realize.
So even if we can't blame butterflies for all the wrong weather forecasts, that whole idea of unpredictability is still fascinating.
Absolutely. And this finite predictability thing, it doesn't just apply to weather. It affects lots of other things in our world. We'll get into those a bit later, though.
So we've talked about weather, but where else does this butterfly effect, show up?
Well, what's really wild is this isn't just a weather thing. It pops up in all sorts of places you wouldn't expect.
Okay, like where? I'm curious.
How about, like, the super tiny world quantum mechanics?
All right. Wait, are you saying even at the subatomic level, these chaotic principles, they're at work?
Exactly. Research suggests that even those tiny particles, the ones that make up everything around us, they might be showing sensitive dependence on initial conditions.
Whoa, that sounds like some serious sci-fi stuff. Does that mean this butterfly effect, it's like a universal law, not just some weird weather thing?
It really makes you think, right? It suggests that this butterfly effect could be a fundamental part of, well, how the universe works, from tiny particles to giant weather systems.
Okay, I'm certain to see how this concept goes way beyond just butterflies and tornadoes. It's almost like a whole new way of thinking about cause and effect.
Exactly. It challenges our assumptions about how predictable the world really is. Maybe we've been underestimating how much power these small events have,
Yeah.
to create big changes.
It makes you think about those big moments in history. Like, what if Archduke Franz Ferdinand, what if he hadn't been assassinated? Would World War I have even happened?
That's a classic example of how history can hinge on what seem like random events. It makes you wonder how much of history is shaped by these unpredictable chain reactions.
It's kind of scary to think that so much of our world might be influenced by things we can't control.
Yeah.
But it also makes history way more interesting, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It really shows how interconnected everything is. Even small actions can ripple through time and have huge consequences.
This makes me wonder about chance, and randomness in our own lives. Like, what if I made a different decision yesterday? Would my life be totally different today?
That's the beauty of the butterfly effect. It pushes us to think about all those choices and those circumstances that shape our reality.
But earlier you mentioned some scientists are challenging the traditional view of the butterfly effect, especially when it comes to weather systems. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, you're right. There are scientists like Bo and Shen. They've been studying this idea, this balance between chaos and order in weather systems. Their research suggests that weather patterns aren't totally chaotic. They actually have a balance of predictable patterns and unpredictable events.
So it's not just total randomness. There's some structure in there.
Exactly. Their work points to this idea of multi-stability. It means a system, like the atmosphere, it can exist in several stable states.
Okay, so how do I picture that?
Think about kayaking down a river. Sometimes you hit those crazy rapids, it's totally unpredictable. But other times, you're in a calm stretch, your path's more predictable.
Okay, I get it. That's a good analogy. So you're not saying the butterfly effect is wrong, but maybe it's just one part of a more complex picture.
Exactly. The atmosphere can definitely be sensitive to initial conditions, but it's not always the main thing driving those weather patterns.
So where does that leave us? Should we still be freaking out about butterflies causing tornadoes?
Well, it's less about literal butterflies and tornadoes. It's more about understanding that complex systems, they can be unpredictable, at least to a certain point. Even small events can have a big impact, especially in the right circumstances.
So it comes back to that finite predictability idea, right? Even if we can't say for sure a butterfly caused a specific weather event, that bigger principle still applies.
Exactly. Our ability to predict the future, whether it's weather, the stock market, or even social trends, it'll always have limits, especially with complex systems.
Which makes me think, how did this concept make its way into pop culture? It seems like the butterfly effect is everywhere, in movies, books, even everyday conversations.
It's true. The butterfly effect has really captured people's imaginations. It speaks to something deep within us, this fascination with cause and effect.
It's like a warning, reminding us that our actions, even the small ones, can have consequences we don't see coming.
Right. And in fiction, it's often used to build suspense or to explore themes of fate and free will. Think about movies like The Butterfly Effect or Sliding Doors. Tiny choices lead to completely different lives.
Those are good examples. The butterfly effect gives us a framework for stories about parallel universes.
Yeah.
And the power of choice, the idea that everything's connected.
Exactly. And it sparks some really interesting discussions, doesn't it? After all, who hasn't wondered what if about their own life choices?
It's a question we all ask ourselves at some point. So we've talked about weather, history, even quantum mechanics. What other areas of our lives could be influenced by this butterfly effect?
That's a great question. It leads us to some even more fascinating applications of this concept. So let's think bigger picture now, something that affects everyone, like pandemics.
Okay, pandemics.
Yeah.
How does the butterfly effect play into a global health crisis?
Okay, so imagine one person, they're carrying this super contagious virus. They're like the butterfly in this scenario, right? And now think about all the things that could determine whether that virus spreads or stays contained.
Like their travel, public health measures, maybe even just random encounters.
Exactly. Every interaction, every flight, every handshake, it could start a chain of events. And those events, they could lead to a massive pandemic.
But on the other hand, those same things could stop the virus right in its tracks. It really shows how, even with something huge like a pandemic, small things can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It reminds us how connected we all are. Our choices, they can have consequences way beyond what we can even imagine.
It's kind of scary, but it also makes you realize we all have a part to play in keeping each other safe.
That's a good point. It shows how important things like public health measures are, global cooperation, even just personal responsibility.
It's like the butterfly effect, yeah. It's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
But it also makes us want to be more proactive.
Exactly. It's not just about doom and gloom. It's about realizing we can make a difference. Even small actions, getting vaccinated, washing our hands, they all have ripple effects. They contribute to a healthier world.
So we've gone from tiny butterflies to global pandemics. This concept, it really applies to so much of our lives. What if we step back and really get this idea of the butterfly effect? How does it change the way we try to solve problems?
That's a good question. I think it encourages us to think bigger, to see how seemingly separate issues are connected. It also reminds us to be flexible, to be open to unexpected solutions.
So instead of just focusing on one problem at a time, we need to see the bigger picture, all the connections.
Right. And remember, solutions can come from the most surprising places, like a small community project. It could turn into a global movement.
It's like that saying, think globally, act locally, right? Even small actions, when we all do them, can create a huge wave of change.
Exactly. The butterfly effect, it shows us we're not just watching this chaotic world happen. We can influence what happens, even if we don't always see the full impact of our actions.
This has been an incredible journey exploring this whole butterfly effect. We've seen how this idea from chaos theory can be applied to so many things. Weather patterns, global pandemics, it really shows you how interconnected everything is.
It definitely makes you rethink how cause and effect works. It shows us the limits of what we know, but also all the possibilities. Even small actions can have big consequences, both good and bad.
Well said. And to you, our listener, we'll leave you with this thought. What small action will you take today, knowing that it could have ripple effects you can't even imagine? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Welcome to our deep dive into the world of geothermal energy.
Yeah.
It's more than just hot springs and geysers, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We've got a Wikipedia article here, and it's a really fascinating picture of this whole world.
It really is.
We're going to uncover how people have been tapping into this power source for millennia, and how cutting-edge technology is making it even more relevant today.
And that's what I think is so cool about it, that it's not like some futuristic concept. It's literally as old as the Earth itself.
Right.
It's been with us since the planet's formation.
Yeah.
Just quietly simmering beneath our feet.
Okay, well, let's break this down for our listener.
Sure.
What exactly is geothermal energy? Is it just about things being hot underground?
Yeah, so at its core, it is the thermal energy generated and stored within the Earth.
Okay.
It originates from the planet's formation, right?
Okay.
And the constant decay of radioactive elements deep inside. And so scientists have actually estimated that the Earth's internal heat content is a mind-boggling 10 to the power of 31 joules.
Wow, that's...
To put that into perspective, that's 3 times 10 to the 15th terawatt hours.
Okay.
That's enough to power human civilization for millennia.
Millennia. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize just how much potential energy is just beneath us. But how do we actually access this massive energy source?
Yeah.
It's not like we can just dig a hole and plug in.
Well, it's not that simple, no.
Okay.
But we primarily access this heat in areas near tectonic plate boundaries, where the Earth's crust is thinner and hotter rock is closer to the surface. Places like Iceland or the Pacific Ring of Fire, where, volcanic activity is a visible reminder of the Earth's internal heat.
Right.
So it's like the Earth's internal heat is closer to the surface in these regions.
That makes sense. So it's not just about heat, but also about where that heat is most accessible.
Exactly.
But this isn't some recent discovery.
No.
Right. People have been utilizing geothermal energy for a long time.
Right.
I mean, hot springs have been a thing forever.
Absolutely. Our ancestors were already bathing in naturally occurring hot springs.
Yeah.
Way back in the Paleolithic era.
Wow.
The Romans were using hot springs for public baths and underfloor heating as early as the 1st century CE.
Really?
Yeah. And there's even a geothermal district heating system in Chaussée, France.
Wow.
That's been operational since the 15th century.
It's mind-blowing to think about how they were utilizing this energy source so long ago. And it really puts into perspective how we're just now starting to really understand the full potential of geothermal energy.
Right.
But things really started to change in the 20th century when we began to harness geothermal energy for electricity generation, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to geothermal power, a renewable energy source that harnesses the Earth's heat to generate electricity.
Okay, so how does it work? I mean, how do we actually convert that underground heat into electricity?
So there are 3 main types of geothermal power plants.
Okay.
Dry steam, flash steam, and binary cycle.
Okay.
And they each have their own unique methods, but all rely on extracting heat from the Earth's interior to generate electricity.
Can you walk our listener through how each of these power plants work?
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's start with the dry steam plants.
Okay.
These plants use steam directly from underground reservoirs to spin turbines.
Oh.
It's like a giant tea kettle with the Earth providing the heat.
That's a great analogy.
Then there are the flash steam plants.
Okay.
These plants pull high-pressure hot water from underground,
Okay.
which then converts to steam as the pressure drops.
Interesting.
Finally, we have binary cycle plants,
Okay.
which use a secondary fluid with a lower boiling point to capture heat from the geothermal water and drive turbines. These are particularly effective for harnessing lower temperature resources.
Okay.
And as of 2019, the global geothermal power capacity was an impressive 13,900 megawatts.
Wow.
With the U.S. being a major contributor.
The U.S. being a major contributor.
Yeah.
For some reason, I always associate geothermal energy with places like Iceland.
Yeah.
And, those incredible hot springs.
Right.
It's interesting to hear that it's becoming more prevalent here in the U.S. But why is geothermal power so attractive? Is it just about having a source of energy that's always available?
That's one of the major benefits.
Okay.
Unlike solar or wind power,
Yeah.
which depend on the weather, right?
Right.
Geothermal power plants can run 24/7
Wow.
regardless of conditions above ground.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It seems like it could be a fantastic complement to other renewable energy sources.
Absolutely.
But let's dive deeper into the process.
Sure.
How do we actually tap into these geothermal reservoirs? What's happening underground?
So deep beneath our feet are these natural hydrothermal reservoirs.
Okay.
Some are vapor-dominated, like the famous geysers in California.
Yeah.
Others are liquid-dominated, filled with hot water.
Okay.
And we can tap into these reservoirs directly by drilling wells, much like we do for oil and gas.
It's amazing to picture these wells reaching down into the Earth's depths,
Yes.
tapping into this hidden energy source.
Hmm.
But I imagine that not every location has these ideal natural reservoirs, right?
You're exactly right.
Okay.
And that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
Engineers have developed methods to create or enhance geothermal systems
Okay.
in areas where those ideal conditions don't exist naturally.
So we're talking about engineered geothermal systems.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit more about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
There are two main types: enhanced geothermal systems, or EGS,
Okay.
and closed-loop geothermal systems.
Yeah.
EGS utilizes techniques similar to fracking
Okay.
to create artificial reservoirs by injecting water into hot, dry rock deep underground.
Interesting.
This fractures the rock, creating pathways for water to circulate and absorb heat,
Right.
which is then extracted to produce electricity.
So we're essentially giving Mother Earth a little nudge to help create those reservoirs.
Exactly.
What about closed-loop systems?
So closed-loop systems are even more environmentally friendly.
Oh, okay.
They circulate fluid through a network of deep, closed pipes buried in hot rock.
Okay.
This allows for heat transfer without direct contact with the surrounding rock,
Okay.
minimizing the risk of contamination or triggering seismic activity.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've got these different ways to tap into geothermal energy, but
Yeah.
how does it stack up economically?
Hmm.
Is it cost-effective compared to other energy sources?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The economics of geothermal energy can be tricky.
Okay.
While the operating costs are remarkably low, due to minimal fuel costs, the upfront capital costs for drilling and constructing those power plants can be substantial.
Okay.
Think specialized drilling equipment,
Yeah.
dealing with extremely high temperatures and pressures,
Wow.
and the overall complexity of the process.
Drilling into hot, fractured rock thousands of feet below the surface.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be challenging and expensive. Is it more expensive than, say, drilling for oil and gas?
It is.
Okay.
And for several reasons.
Okay.
Geothermal reservoirs are often found in tougher rock formations,
Yeah.
like igneous or metamorphic rock, which are much harder to drill through than the sedimentary rock typically encountered in oil and gas drilling.
Right.
The rock can be fractured and abrasive,
Yeah.
leading to wear and tear on drilling tools
Right.
and costly repairs or replacements.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Additionally, the high temperatures and corrosive fluids underground can limit the use of sensitive electronics,
Oh, wow.
making the drilling process even more challenging.
So it's a combination of the challenging environment, specialized equipment, and a higher risk of complications.
Right.
It's no wonder geothermal drilling can be a costly endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other factors contributing to the cost?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The cementing process is another factor.
Okay.
Geothermal wells require cementing from top to bottom
Okay.
to prevent the casing from expanding and contracting with the extreme temperature changes.
Oh, wow.
This is different from oil and gas wells,
Okay.
which typically only need cementing at the bottom.
Interesting.
And then there's the size.
Okay.
The diameter of geothermal wells is considerably larger than oil and gas wells, requiring more materials and manpower.
So we've established that those initial costs can be a significant hurdle.
Right.
But are there any signs of hope?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Technological advancements are constantly being made, helping to drive down costs and open up new possibilities.
Okay.
Remember those enhanced geothermal systems we talked about? They're a game changer.
Okay.
By creating artificial reservoirs in areas that were previously unsuitable for geothermal power,
Right.
we're expanding the potential reach of this energy source.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
It sounds like, despite the challenges, the future of geothermal energy is looking brighter.
Absolutely.
But what about the broader impact? What are the socioeconomic benefits of geothermal energy development?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
A recent report from the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program,
Okay.
or ESMAP,
Okay.
highlighted the impressive positive impacts of geothermal energy development,
Okay.
particularly in terms of job creation and local economic growth.
That's definitely a compelling argument in favor of geothermal energy, not just as a clean, renewable energy source, but also for its potential to boost local economies and create jobs.
Exactly.
It sounds like a win-win.
It really does.
And it's not just about employment, right?
Yeah.
Geothermal development often fosters collaboration with local communities, leading to infrastructure improvements, skill-building programs, and revenue-sharing models.
Absolutely.
It sounds like geothermal energy has the potential to revitalize communities while providing a clean energy source.
Yeah,
It's a powerful combination.
it is.
But as with any energy source, we need to consider the environmental implications.
Right.
Geothermal energy is often touted as a sustainable alternative to fossil fuels. Are there any downsides?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
While geothermal energy is inherently sustainable
Yeah.
because the Earth's heat content is practically inexhaustible,
Right.
it's essential to acknowledge that there can be local environmental impacts.
Okay, let's dive into that. What
Okay.
kind of impacts are we talking about? What should our listener be aware of?
So one concern is the potential for local temperature and water level drawdowns over time.
Okay.
We've observed this in some of the oldest geothermal sites,
Mm-hmm.
like Lardarello, Wairakai, and the geysers, where decades of continuous extraction have led to reduced output.
So it's not entirely without consequences.
Right.
It's important to acknowledge that even renewable energy sources can have an impact.
You're right.
Yeah.
But the good news is that careful management practices can help mitigate these effects.
Okay.
Things like reducing production rates
Right.
and injecting additional water back into the reservoirs
Mm-hmm.
can allow those wells to recover their capacity.
That's reassuring. It's great to know that these issues are being addressed.
Mhm.
Are there any other environmental concerns? What else should we be thinking about?
Another issue, though less significant than with fossil fuels, is the release of greenhouse gases and other potentially toxic elements during the extraction process.
Okay.
Geothermal fluids often contain dissolved gases like carbon dioxide,
Right.
hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia.
Gotcha.
If released into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
these can contribute to global warming, acid rain, and unpleasant odors.
So there are emissions involved, even with geothermal energy.
Yes.
It's important to be transparent about that.
Absolutely, but it's crucial to emphasize
Okay.
that the emissions from geothermal plants are generally far lower than those from fossil fuel power plants.
Okay.
And the industry is continuously working to improve emission control systems
Okay.
to further reduce their environmental footprint.
Right.
Some newer closed-loop geothermal technologies have the potential to virtually eliminate emissions altogether.
That's a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah.
What about the other potentially toxic elements?
So we also need to be mindful of trace amounts of toxic elements, such as mercury, arsenic, boron, and antimony,
Okay.
sometimes found in geothermal fluids.
Right.
These elements typically precipitate out as the water cools
Okay.
and are reinjected back into the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a risk of leakage or accidental release, which could contaminate nearby soil or water sources.
So it sounds like careful monitoring and responsible management practices are key to minimizing these risks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about being proactive and ensuring that these projects are implemented with the utmost care for the surrounding environment.
Right. It's all about being responsible with this energy source.
Absolutely.
We can't just take it for granted
Well,
and expect there to be no consequences.
That's right.
So we need to be mindful of that.
and we can't forget about the potential impact on land stability.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about injecting water to create those enhanced geothermal systems?
Yes.
Well, that process, along with the extraction of geothermal fluids, can sometimes trigger subsidence or the sinking of land or even uplift.
And we've seen examples of this happening in the past.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
The Wairakai field in New Zealand experienced subsidence issues,
Wow.
while in Stelfen and Breisgau, Germany,
Okay.
geothermal activity caused tectonic uplift.
That's a sobering reminder that we need to proceed with caution. When harnessing this powerful energy source,
Absolutely.
we need to understand the potential consequences and take steps to minimize the risks.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And speaking of caution,
Yes.
we also need to be mindful of the potential for induced seismicity,
Okay.
which is basically human-triggered earthquakes.
Oh, wow.
Those enhanced geothermal systems, while promising,
Yeah.
can sometimes disrupt underground fault lines,
Right.
leading to seismic events.
Okay.
A project in Basel, Switzerland,
Yeah.
had to be suspended due to a series of earthquakes triggered by water injection.
It sounds like thorough geological surveys and responsible drilling practices are crucial to avoid these unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's crucial to understand the subsurface environment before we start working with it.
So while geothermal energy offers a compelling path towards a cleaner energy future,
Yeah.
it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
We need to be aware of the potential environmental trade-offs and strive to minimize our impact on the planet.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's about finding a balance between harnessing this incredible resource while safeguarding the delicate ecosystems that surround us.
And with that thoughtful note,
Hmm.
we'll pause our deep dive for now.
Okay.
But don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
When we return in part 2, we'll
Yeah.
be exploring the global production of geothermal energy, looking at specific examples from countries leading the way in harnessing this powerful resource.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. I'm ready to continue our exploration of geothermal energy. In this part, we're taking a trip around the globe to see how different countries are putting this powerful resource to work.
Yeah, I'm excited to share some real-world examples. Let's start with a country that's practically synonymous with geothermal energy, Iceland.
Iceland, it's like the poster child for geothermal energy, with its stunning landscapes shaped by volcanoes and glaciers.
Exactly. Iceland sits right on the mid-Atlantic ridge, a major tectonic plate boundary, which makes it a geothermal hotspot. They've been harnessing this energy for decades, and it's now a cornerstone of their energy system. They heat homes, power greenhouses, and even melt snow on sidewalks using geothermal energy.
Melting snow on sidewalks. That's incredible. It speaks to how deeply geothermal energy is integrated into their lives.
It really does. And they're not stopping there. Iceland has set a goal to become the world's first fossil fuel-free nation, and geothermal energy is playing a leading role in that ambition.
That's incredibly inspiring. It gives you a sense of what's possible when a country truly commits to renewable energy. What other countries are making significant strides in geothermal energy production?
The Philippines is another geothermal powerhouse. They began exploring geothermal potential back in the 1960s and have since become one of the world's top producers of geothermal electricity.
That's impressive. What factors have contributed to their success in this field?
Well, it's a combination of favorable geography, supportive government policies, and strong local expertise. Like Iceland, the Philippines sits within the Pacific Ring of Fire, giving them abundant geothermal resources. They've also implemented policies that encourage investment in geothermal development and have cultivated a deep understanding of geothermal technology.
It sounds like they've created a recipe for success.
They certainly have. The Philippines boasts several large geothermal power plants, including the Tunganon geothermal field, one of the biggest in the world. They've successfully integrated geothermal energy into their electricity grid, providing a stable and reliable power source for millions of people.
That's a fantastic example of how geothermal energy can be scaled up to meet the needs of a nation. It makes you wonder what's possible in other parts of the world. Let's shift our focus to the Americas and explore the geothermal landscape of the United States.
Okay.
The United States is a vast country with diverse geology. Where are we finding the most geothermal activity?
The western states, particularly California and Nevada, are geothermal hotbeds. Think of the iconic Geysers geothermal field in California, which has been generating electricity for decades.
The geysers. It's a name that immediately evokes images of powerful geothermal activity.
Right. It's a prime example of a vapor-dominated geothermal system, where a superheated steam directly spins turbines to generate electricity.
Wow.
And what about Nevada? How are they harnessing their geothermal resources?
Yeah.
Nevada has vast reserves of hot water reservoirs deep underground. They've been leading the way in developing binary cycle power plants, which are particularly well suited for harnessing lower temperature geothermal resources. Remember how we talked about those systems using a secondary fluid to capture heat and drive turbines?
Yes. It's fascinating how different technologies can be tailored to specific geothermal conditions. It seems like the United States has a diverse portfolio of geothermal resources and technologies.
Absolutely. Each region has its own unique geothermal characteristics, and that's driving innovation in how we harness this energy source.
So we've seen how Iceland, the Philippines, and the U.S. are leading the charge in geothermal energy production. Are there any other regions worth highlighting? Places that might surprise our listener?
Let's head over to Europe, where Hungary is quietly becoming a geothermal leader.
Hungary. I haven't heard much about their geothermal endeavors. Tell us more.
Okay, so Hungary has a long tradition of using geothermal energy for heating and bathing, going all the way back to Roman times. But in recent years, they've been ramping up efforts to expand geothermal power generation and reduce their reliance on fossil fuels.
What's their strategy for achieving this?
Well, they're focusing on developing enhanced geothermal systems, particularly in the Pannonian Basin, which has significant geothermal potential. They're also investing in research and development to improve drilling techniques and optimize energy extraction.
It sounds like they're taking a proactive and strategic approach to unlock their geothermal potential.
Exactly. And they're not alone. Several other European countries, including Germany, France, and Italy, are also exploring the potential of enhanced geothermal systems to unlock new sources of clean energy.
It's encouraging to see so many countries around the world recognizing the value of geothermal energy and investing in its development. It feels like we're on the cusp of a geothermal revolution.
It's certainly an exciting time to be following the progress of geothermal energy. As technology advances, we can expect to see even greater growth and innovation in the sector in the years to come.
But with all this growth, it's important to consider the bigger picture. How sustainable is all this geothermal development? We've already touched upon the potential environmental impacts. Can we extract this heat indefinitely without consequences?
That's a crucial question. That has sparked important debates among scientists and policymakers. Remember, the Earth's heat content is vast, but it's not infinite. The rate at which we extract heat can have localized impacts on temperature and water levels, as we've seen in some cases.
So it's about finding a balance between utilizing this resource and ensuring its longevity.
Exactly. It's about harnessing geothermal energy responsibly, understanding the limitations of specific sites, and implementing sustainable management practices to ensure long-term viability. This means carefully monitoring production rates, re-injecting fluids back into the reservoirs to maintain pressure and temperature, and constantly innovating to minimize environmental impacts.
It's like any resource we can't simply take without considering the consequences. Sustainability is about finding that sweet spot where we can benefit from a resource without depleting it for future generations.
Precisely. Geothermal energy presents a tremendous opportunity to transition toward a cleaner and more sustainable energy future. But it's not a free pass to exploit the Earth's resources indiscriminately. It requires a thoughtful, balanced approach that considers both the benefits and the potential risks.
That's a crucial point to remember as we navigate the complexities of energy production. It's been an incredible journey so far, exploring how different countries are harnessing the Earth's heat. From Iceland's geothermal wonderland to the Philippines' successful integration of geothermal power into their grid, to the U.S.'s pioneering work with enhanced geothermal systems, and Hungary's proactive approach to expanding their geothermal capacity, it's clear that geothermal energy is a dynamic and evolving field with immense potential.
It truly is. And as we collectively move towards a more sustainable future, geothermal energy is poised to play an increasingly significant role in meeting our global energy needs.
But, as we've discussed, it's crucial to approach geothermal development responsibly, balancing the benefits with the potential environmental impacts.
Absolutely. Sustainable management practices, continuous innovation, and a deep understanding of the subsurface environment are key to harnessing this powerful resource for generations to come.
And with that reminder of our responsibility to the planet, we'll conclude part 2 of our deep dive, but don't go anywhere. In part 3, we'll wrap up our exploration by looking at the exciting future possibilities of geothermal energy and some final thoughts. Welcome back to our deep dive into geothermal energy. We've journeyed from the Earth's core to geothermal power plants around the world. Now, as we resurface, it's time to shift our focus to the future. What lies ahead for this powerful, renewable resource?
Well, what excites me most is the untapped potential of geothermal energy.
Yeah.
We've only just begun to scratch the surface. Remember that statistic about the Earth's internal heat being enough to power human civilization for millennia?
It is hard to fathom that much energy,
Right.
especially when you consider how little of it we're currently utilizing.
Exactly. Imagine a future where geothermal energy isn't limited by location or geological conditions.
Right.
A future where clean, renewable energy is accessible practically anywhere on Earth.
That sounds like a dream come true. But how do we get there?
Yeah.
What needs to happen to make this vision a reality?
I think it all boils down to innovation.
Yeah, okay.
Researchers and engineers around the world are developing technologies that could revolutionize the geothermal industry.
Okay, let's talk about these innovations.
Yeah.
Give us a glimpse into the future of geothermal energy.
All right, so one fascinating area is superhot rock geothermal technology.
Okay.
This involves drilling ultra-deep wells,
Okay.
sometimes going down 10 kilometers or more, to tap into rock formations with temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius.
500 degrees Celsius.
Yeah,
That's almost 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
it is.
Why go to such extremes? What's the advantage of drilling so deep?
Well, at those scorching temperatures,
Yeah.
we can generate supercritical steam,
Okay.
which is far more efficient at driving turbines than conventional steam,
Oh, wow.
meaning we can extract significantly more energy from each well.
Okay.
And this makes geothermal power even more competitive with other energy sources.
So it's about maximizing efficiency and output.
Exactly.
Okay, are there any other advancements on the horizon
Yeah.
that could make geothermal energy more viable?
Another promising area is the continued development of closed-loop geothermal systems.
Okay.
Remember, these systems circulate fluid through closed pipes
Yes.
to minimize environmental impacts.
Right.
Well, researchers are creating advanced materials and drilling techniques to push these systems even deeper and make them more cost-effective.
So we're talking about reaching deeper, hotter resources while minimizing our impact on the environment.
Exactly.
What a powerful combination.
It is.
Are there any other groundbreaking concepts being explored?
There are some truly futuristic ideas out there,
Okay.
like using magma,
Magma.
molten rock,
Wow.
as a direct heat source.
That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
I know, right?
But is it even feasible?
Well, it's still in the early stages of research,
Okay.
but the potential is mind-blowing. Tapping into magma could provide an almost limitless source of clean energy.
It's incredible to think about the possibilities.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back down to earth for a moment.
Okay.
What are some of the more immediate challenges facing the geothermal industry? What's holding back widespread adoption?
So one of the biggest hurdles, as we've discussed, is the high upfront cost
Right.
of drilling and building geothermal power plants.
Yeah.
To overcome this, we need continued investment in research and development to drive down those costs and make geothermal energy more accessible.
Right. It all comes back to economics.
Yeah.
Making it financially viable is crucial for wider adoption.
Absolutely.
What are some other challenges?
You know, public perception is another hurdle.
Okay.
Many people are still unfamiliar with geothermal energy
Right.
or have misconceptions about its safety and effectiveness.
So it's about educating the public and addressing those concerns.
Exactly.
Okay.
We need to make sure people understand the benefits and address any concerns they may have.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the need for supportive policies and regulations.
Right.
You know, governments can play a crucial role
Yeah.
in encouraging investment and streamlining the development process for geothermal projects.
It sounds like it's a multifaceted challenge.
It is.
That requires collaboration from researchers, industry leaders, policymakers, and the public.
Absolutely. The future of geothermal energy depends on everyone working together.
Yeah.
We need to share knowledge, encourage innovation,
Right.
and create a supportive environment for this incredible renewable resource to flourish.
Well, that brings us to our final takeaway for our listener.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of geothermal energy, we encourage you to consider, could geothermal energy play a role in your region's energy future? What steps could be taken to explore its potential? Perhaps you could research the geology of your area, look into existing geothermal projects, or even just start a conversation with your local representatives.
Those are all great ideas.
It's all about sparking curiosity and encouraging action. The future of geothermal energy is bright.
It is.
But it needs passionate individuals like you to champion its cause. As we conclude our deep dive, we hope we've inspired you to learn more and be part of the journey towards a cleaner, more sustainable energy future powered by the heart of our planet.